Right, I'm here with Ted Schilowitz. He is as his card says, a futurist, which I like. That's a nice title with Paramount Pictures. Ted, thank you for talking.
Sure, my pleasure.
So we had Frank, and he was talking a little bit about how this really is kind of the future of movies. On your end, I mean, how long has this been kind of in the process? How long have you guys been looking at this as a future, as kind of a future technique of watching movies?
Well, interestingly enough, for me, I've been looking at this since I was actually a little kid.
Really?
Because I grew up in a sort of interesting, magical place called Orlando, Florida, where the idea of various forms of entertainment were elevated, relished, attempted. Some succeeded, some failed, some in the middle. But that culture that Walt Disney created, when he brought that to Orlando, was sort of blossomed in all of this land that he had to experiment with new things. And like what you're seeing with these chairs behind you is a really interesting part of what we call simulation-based entertainment. So interestingly enough, none of this is particularly new, where a lot of people sort of assume that VR just kind of entered the scene and has just been sort of dropped into everybody's awareness. The idea of creating more and more intense and realistic simulations, aka virtual reality, has been around really as long as the cinema arts have been around. Because if you think about what cinema really is trying to transport you to another place with the limitations and restrictions of this big square or rectangle that you're mounted in front of you, and we try and reduce the awareness of your surroundings more and more and more to make you believe that what's happening on the screen is real, right? So what these devices and many other things that are in sort of the industry of what we call virtual reality and mixed reality now are taking that to a whole new level and allowing it based on the type of technology, the ubiquitousness of the technology, the cost reduction of this technology just based on the accessibility of compute and the accessibility of very advanced screens and very advanced trackers. Actually allows this to kind of get in the hands of everybody in the next few years, as opposed to dedicated places like theme parks or film festivals or the very sort of exotic few that might have very expensive computers and specialized hardware. It's getting much less specialized and much more everywhere.
Well, I'm curious, kind of, as you all do your research and kind of look into this, I mean, what has been kind of the neurological, I mean, how are people reacting to it in their minds? I mean, is it kind of, I'm sure heightened experience, but I'm sure there's science based behind it that shows why it heightens it.
It's actually a really good question, because what we've seen, and so my life as a futurist, after I retired from my movie camera company I helped work on and bring to life and a few other things that I did, started at 20th Century Fox and now was with Paramount. And we really started very early on this current wave of virtual reality. And what we discovered with some of the projects that we did very early on is that virtual reality is different than cinematic reality in the fact that it's actually spatial, meaning just like in real life, like here we are doing this interview, if I put my hands on you and did this, that's a real thing that just happened, and it actually occupies a place in your brain that's different than if I just pretended to do it. So what virtual reality does is it builds three-dimensional simulations in our brain and actually creates much more realistic memories than a two-dimensional screen, which is interesting from a philosophical standpoint. When you kind of think about what is happening when you put on a VR headset, with all of the fact that we're still kind of in the earliest primordial days of developing this into really wide-stream consumer technology, but it creates actual memories in space as opposed to screen memories. So when you talk to people that have done virtual reality experiences, they will tell you that it feels like a real memory versus watching a movie where they don't have that same sense of it, because the fact that it actually occupies real space in your brain. Even though it's artificial, it actually pretends to take place in a real space, and that's what's so intriguing about it.
That's really interesting. The last thing I just wanted to ask is, there's a lot of different examples here. They have the Dunkirk one, the First Man one. There, I was talking to Frank about the different variety.
I've got a couple of things I've been involved in here, Alien Piece.
Yeah, so I guess, is there kind of a genre that you guys like to lean on more often, or are you just kind of like, let's try VR with anything?
I think probably the real answer to that is things that are more intense tend to lead these kinds of experiences. So horror, action adventure, hardcore stuff, very visual, audio, intense space things, tend to be the things that people lean into more. But that's really just because it's the way the earliest sort of experiments of this tend to try and find those raw emotions. But what we're seeing is more nuanced stuff is actually happening, where it's not just horror, it's more suspense-driven stuff. It's not just like the most overt dramatic moments, it's more subtle emotional arcs and emotional stories that are being told. And that's just the evolution of the technology and storytelling. Is it tends to start with really bold things that you make assumptions. Horror and action seem like the things, because it's kind of a video gamey sort of thing to get people to a certain place really quickly. But as the medium matures, what we're seeing now, you're starting to see more mature storytelling that uses those tenets, but not so overt. So you can actually see kind of all of it here at Scad over the week, which is kind of a fun place to be.
It's definitely, like we said, it's free. You just gotta make a reservation here. Well, thank you so much for talking.
Yeah, sure, my pleasure.
Honestly, I feel like I could probably go on for another hour, but
good to be in Savannah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks.